If you're in US, evening to you. We will start the session in a few minutes. Before we start, we would like to cover a few housekeeping items. Please mute your microphone to avoid any disruptions during the presentation. And if you have questions, feel free to type them in the chat room. Okay, we shall start the session right now. First of all, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Katharina Lee, and I am the inaugural founding president of the Asia Pacific chapter of the Chinese American Librarian Association, CALA. And before we start this session, we would like to let everyone know that this session is in recording. And thank you for joining us again. And this is CALA Asia Pacific session. CALA, which is the Chinese American Librarian Association, has been an excellent platform for Chinese librarians in US, Canada, and other parts of the world to contribute their librarianship and advance their careers. Many librarians here in Asia Pacific are very much looking forward to this, our first keynote presentation from Laurie. Thank you, Laurie, for joining us. Right. Okay, I will just do a quick introduction. The Asia Pacific chapter was newly launched last year. We aim to deepen the partnership between CALA member and the chapters in the US and Canada with libraries, librarians, library association, and library companies in the Asia Pacific region. So we share the communication among Chinese librarianship in the Asia Pacific and Chinese the CALA members in the US and Canada. Additionally, we hope you will join us as the Asia Pacific chapter members. Okay, and I'm going to start this session. In this session, you will learn a lot from Laurie, and I shall let Laurie introduce herself. Laurie, over to you.
Thank you very much for having me. It's evening here in Oregon where I am located. So right now it's also raining. And so I want to welcome everyone and thanks for taking the time out in your morning to join me for this conversation. It is in Menti, which if you haven't used it before is poll software so that I can get some feedback during the presentation and we can learn from one another. So I also wanted to thank Ray Pun, who helped me to put together this presentation. Ray, due to health reasons, couldn't be here today. But I hope that I am able to answer your questions. And I worked quite a bit with Ray in the past on other activities and also in conversations about artificial intelligence in libraries. So as Katerina said, a little bit about me. I am a librarian at Oregon State University. We're located on the west coast of the United States. And how did I get to this place of talking about AI with librarians? So as you can see, I'm an instructional and digital initiatives librarian. And so my primary job is working with researchers, and that includes students and faculty, to help them with their projects, to help them with research, provide subject liaison responsibilities in different colleges, and then information literacy as well. So what happened in my library is in the spring of 2023, many librarians in the US became aware of hallucinations from generative AI tools like ChatGPT. Hallucination, if you haven't heard the word, I prefer the word fabrication, but computer scientists are definitely the creators of the word hallucination, and it has become the most popular term. But basically, when any AI tool, ChatGPT included, creates information, it always includes some minor percent of information that is completely made up. The lowest fabrications right now are at about 2% for some tools, but the way we became aware is students were coming to our desk and other desks in the US, presenting materials they were looking for, like books or journals. And when they would bring them, the librarian would help, only to discover that it had been a list provided by ChatGPT, and parts or all of the list were completely fabricated. So this did happen to a librarian here at my university, for example, and she worked with an international student. And she was working with this student for over an hour trying to find the materials. Only in the end, the student kind of quietly said, I used ChatGPT to find this information. And that's when our librarian became aware that the materials were completely made up and fabricated. So with that in mind, our department here, I'm in the research and learning department at my university library. We decided as a group that someone or two people or more should look into AI and how that would affect our services in the future. And so I volunteered, and that's how I began my journey looking into artificial intelligence and how it affects libraries. And so today I'm here to talk about that learning that I've done. And over the past several months, I've given a few presentations. In January, I published an article in the the Journal of Library Administration, titled Artificial Intelligence, 8 Critical Questions for Libraries. And this coming year at my university, I will be teaching 2 classes. Both classes are called Generative Artificial Intelligence and Society. And so those will be small classes, not for library students, but for any student who wants to take the class. So I have told you that I am from Oregon. If you are logged into Menti, you can do it here through the QR code or at the top, and then you use that number. If you could tell us where you are joining us from today, it should appear here on my screen. So we'll just give everyone a few minutes to get logged in. This is my first time trying to use Menti in a live audience remotely. I've used it in in-person presentations. So it's a little bit of an experiment. And the nice thing is it will save the materials when I'm done. And then I'll put everything from my PowerPoint in this into a Google slide, and I'll share that afterward. So far, Shanghai, Taipei, New York, it's great. And the reason I'm starting with this slide is I do have some more slides coming up, but if you stay on the same page, it will update with the next question while you remain on this page. And it looks like we have about 36 people here today. I have engaged with some librarians in Spain. I do some work in Spain and in Canada and some other countries about AI, but I haven't worked that much yet with librarians in Asia. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation that we have today so that I can um, further inform my own learning and figure out how we can all work together as librarians with AI moving forward. So this looks like we have a good mix of folks. I'm impressed by the folks here from New York and Washington, D.C., because they are 3 hours ahead of me right now. And right now in Oregon, it's 6:30 in the evening. So outside of New York, outside of Oregon, in New York and D.C., it would be 9:30, I think. So I'm going to move forward and it will advance the slide that you have on your Menti. And if you didn't get to the Menti in time, that slide will come back later. Okay, so for today, I'm going to do a little introduction and I'm going to then talk about libraries and generative AI. I always like getting practical examples so that I can have ideas from librarians and other libraries, and then a quick question and discussion at the end for any questions you might have. When I uploaded this slideshow, I noticed a couple slides disappeared right before the presentation. I don't know where they went, so I'll just try to remember what was in them, and we'll just kind of go from there. So I do want to start with a conversation about OpenAI because they are currently the main drivers in terms of artificial intelligence. They are the creators of ChatGPT. ChatGPT, as created by OpenAI, OpenAI started in 2015, so they have been around a while. They released ChatGPT, or excuse me, they released GPT-3 in 2020. So I'm going to get to this in a little bit, but basically, when we're talking about ChatGPT, there's what's called a foundational model underneath. That's kind of how I visualize it. And the foundation model of ChatGPT-3 is GPT-3. So that's the foundation model. And other chat bots can be built on top of GPT-3 or GPT-4, and now GPT-4o. And so as an example, Bing by Microsoft is built on top of GPT. But ChatGPT is the one that is specifically by OpenAI and using the foundation model GPT-3 or GPT-4. So it gets a little confusing when I'm talking about things because there are large language models, and then there are foundation models, and then there are tools built on top of these foundation models. And that has been, for me, the biggest thing to kind of wrap my brain around as I've continued my learning is how these tools are built and how the information is obtained to build these different tools. And so if you do have further questions about that, I can answer them. I don't know all the tools. Obviously, they're just coming so quickly that it's hard to keep up. It's also hard to, I'm finding, keep up with the ones that might affect libraries or that our researchers here on my university might use. So that's kind of something we're working through here on my campus. And then you might know that last year ChatGPT switched to a subscription model. That's ChatGPT 4, and I have a subscription to it. But in the past month, they released ChatGPT 4o, and some folks are saying it's just as good and you don't need the subscription anymore. I'm not exactly sure about that because I haven't tested out the free one yet. Because again, it's just really, I'm finding it difficult to keep up with all of the many changes. Okay, so to describe how generative AI works, if you could go back to Menti and just add in one word, I'm certain we'll all come up with a different word. Once upon a time, there was a blank. What would you put in the blank? What's the first word that comes into your mind? Once upon a time, there was a mountain, an internet, a stranger. Hmm. A tool, a book. It's great. A student, library search engine. I have to say, as a woman of my age, who was a child in the 1970s, we were read a lot of stories about princesses. So my first reaction would be, once upon a time, there was a princess. And so what I want to show you in this example is that this is really how generative AI works. It's much like a phone where you have had text giving you information, and it predicts the most likely next word in your sentence. And so as you've learned over time, I'm sure the ones that are installed on your phone, they become familiar with you and they are predicting the word they think is most likely that you will use. And so in these situations, for me, maybe it would come up with princess, or for someone else, it would come up with book or wiki. But what makes those text generation with one or two words different than what we're seeing with generative artificial intelligence? And that actually has to do with scale, just the scale of information that artificial intelligence is able to take and then generate new text. So it really was only a few years ago when Stanford and some others figured out how they could build these super large language models called foundation models, and the amount of words and images that could be used in these foundation models. So ultimately, the entirety of the internet, any Google Books, everything. So they were able to then put all of that into the foundation models, and then the foundation models are able to make novel connections between information and generate new text, just much longer and much more comprehensive than was able on your small phone or something like that. And so with that in mind, I do specifically talk about usually generative AI because that is what I come in contact with most in my job and what faculty and staff and students are asking me about here at the university. So it really does tie into information now and where students and staff are going to find their information or the information they are bringing to us. So this is the most popular, I guess I would say, most popular text tools and image tools related to generative AI. And here you can see the overall most popular are Quillbot, ChatGPT, Midjourney, Dolly, and Stable Diffusion. And then text tools, which is what I was talking about with the previous example, is Quillbot and ChatGPT and Copy AI. I have never seen Writer, but keep in mind, these are from countries across the globe. And what the creators of this study did is they went and created a way to use Google search results. And so this is all based on Google search results and what folks have been searching for the past, I think it was 2023. So this is based on search results and the names of tools that people search for the most. And so this can be interesting, but also really interesting is this chart, also by the same group in a similar study format. And again, they were putting in the search tools and then looking by country. And the country that searched for information about these generative AI tools the most was the Philippines. So this is per person, per 100,000 people. Next was Singapore, Canada, UAE, Malaysia, and Australia. I have no idea why these would be, but I do think it's fascinating information to see who is using Google and what information they're getting from it, and where we're going to go from here in terms of AI. So this week, in one of my favorite publications, which is The Atlantic, there was an article called "The Era of Inescapable AI." And that has to do with Apple unveiling their newest tools and phones and whatnot. And in this announcement, they basically said they are integrating AI into everything. So that's something to be aware of, that Apple is getting on board, and that they are now releasing their phones with all these different pieces of AI. So at this point, I really think whatever your opinion is about AI, it's moving forward. And as a librarian, I do think it's important that we're aware of what's happening so that we can inform our patrons of the good, the not so good, the bad, and then help enable an ethical way forward of using AI to the best of our ability. And so I do want to talk a little bit about that. There was a slide here missing, but what I want to say is when describing these things to other people, as I said, there's the foundation model, which is the largest large language model of all. They cost billions of dollars to create. Recently, scientists signed an open letter saying they would need startup costs of $1 billion. This is like at an international level to just assess foundation models. So one example of a foundation model, as I said before, is GPT. So it could be GPT-3. That's a separate foundation model than GPT-4. Both created by OpenAI, but they are the foundation model for tools like Bing Chat, ChatGPT, also Elicit. Elicit is the tool that I have had the most questions about as a university librarian related to doing research. So I'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. And then also Duolingo is using GPT-4. So I've heard, I used to use Duolingo maybe a year or two ago. So I haven't used it recently, but I have heard from some folks how it's changed. And I haven't heard it's necessarily an improvement, but I have heard from some folks that have used it. This is one of those blank slides that I don't understand where things went. So what does this mean for libraries? And I am specifically talking from a university library perspective. So that's where I'm coming from when I discuss AI and ethics. So I think with all of these changes, with all of these tools, with everything just coming at us, I don't know about you, but I often feel a bit overwhelmed, even though I'm trying to keep up with what's going on. And so I think the best way forward is to ground librarian ethics as we move forward with considering it for patrons, for ourselves, and for the future of information. So with that in mind, I'm just going to talk through a few of the guidelines that I've been looking at as I think about what we do with AI. So in the US, we have the American Library Association. That's our main organization, and they have a code of ethics. And specifically, I think number 3, 4, and 9 directly connect with ethics and AI. And these code of ethics were written many, like a few years at least before ChatGPT burst onto the scene in 2022. So as a librarian, I do consider these to be very important. So the first one would be, we protect each library user's right to privacy and confidentiality with respect to information sought or received and consulted, borrowed, or acquired, or transmitted. This has been something that I've been trying to keep pace with in terms of these tools that come out, the foundation models. Many of them scraped all of their data from the internet, and scraped means they use a tool to capture an image of every website, and then they take the text from those pages. So those were all mostly captured without permission, and so there could be private or confidential information that people are unaware that's on the internet. So I'm trying to keep track of who are the most transparent creators of AI, and I'll get to that in a bit. But by transparent, I mean, do we know how the tool was created? Do we know what information went into the tool? Do we know who the company is that owns the tool and their history with privacy? And then what are they doing with that information, and who gets the information? Then there's also respecting intellectual property rights and the dignity of every person. So there have been some issues, and I think this will tie into like the European right to be forgotten. And if you don't know of that law in Europe, it has to do with any person can basically petition to have their name removed from the internet or their record, but with these AI tools, they ingest all the information, and then they're keeping that information. Even if they take it out, it's still become part of the training model. So it's even hard to tell where that data may reside in the future within the model. And then also in the US, we have the Association of College and Research Libraries. And so they have a framework for information literacy that we often rely on to decide and think about how to move forward with instruction and teaching. And so this includes recognizing the implications of information formats that contain static or dynamic information. So this is something that's very interesting to me because I work with Wikipedia. And so Wikipedia, oftentimes people say it's unreliable, but I'm finding these same people will often rely on AI and as if it is reliable in a different way. But what you have to keep in mind with AI is if I go to ChatGPT and ask a question today, right now, and then I ask the exact same question a day later, it will give me different information. So every time it's different, and that I think is going to create some challenges for citations or for finding information once you've gotten it, and then reproducibility. So research is inquiry. This again is where I've been talking with folks about misinformation and disinformation in terms of when you get something from ChatGPT, having students go and make sure they can find the original source. And I do know that sometimes now ChatGPT and other tools will provide a link to the original source. That's what faculty tell me now when I talk with them. But if you click on those links, many times they don't go anywhere. So even the links can be false links. So you want to check that as well. ACRL has a scan that you can look at online. It's a very useful 2023 scan of the entire environment for libraries. But there is a section about AI, and these two are direct quotes from that environmental scan. While generative AI is providing unique images and text outputs, recent AI technology can also be used for unethical applications, like spreading misinformation and disinformation. There may be opportunities in academic librarianship to address these challenges through research, pedagogical interventions, policy development, or in facilitating interdisciplinary scholarly dialogue on the subject. So as an example, here in my library in the spring, I hosted 2 book clubs, and they were about a book that I really learned a lot from called Unmasking AI by Joy Buolamwini. She's an American engineer. Basically, she has her PhD and she studies algorithms and facial recognition software. But we just read one chapter from the book as a book club, and then I invited any faculty that wanted to come at the university to discuss the chapter to come, and both conversations were very rich and interesting, and the faculty really told me afterward that they liked having a space to discuss this and their concerns, but also how we can move forward together. And then, of course, there's IFLA, and IFLA also has a code of ethics. And so if you're looking for some guidance, you could go to the IFLA code of ethics, and how does AI, generative AI, impact access to information? How does it impact individuals and society? Privacy, secrecy, and transparency, open access and intellectual property, also neutrality and professional skills, and then colleague and employee relationships. So on that last bullet, that may seem a little out of the norm, but of course, I'm sure is the same with you. We're having folks in different areas or different departments or in the public libraries or schools just saying, don't use it at all, period. So there's a lot of mixed messages happening in different places. Now, earlier I did talk about transparency, and so I did want to let you know that there is a transparency index. This was created in Stanford, and the folks who put it together are updating it. So they recently updated it in May. There are 100 indicators. I don't offhand know what they are. They're on the website, but they do include things like where did the information come from, and other data points. So I encourage you to look at those just to keep abreast of what the most transparent companies are. These are just a selection of those companies. But before, the first time Stanford did this report, they did it all on their own. And now, because the Transparency Index has become important and people are looking at it, those companies are sending Stanford their information so that it's accurate and up to date, because now they want to participate in this conversation of transparency. In the library, things are moving. And I'm having also some difficulty keeping track of these. As I said, I'm a teaching and instruction librarian. And so when I use things that's in the classroom with students, and I'll be showing them a tool or something. And so I need to keep abreast of how the tools work. But here in our university, of course, we have catalogers, we have collection management and other purchasing that happens. And so this year there was the first time AI language in the Elsevier contract negotiations. I am not part of the Elsevier negotiations. However, for the first time I was consulted by our head librarian about the contracts because they included AI information, and she wanted to know more about how different tools worked, because Elsevier basically said they didn't want any AI tools interacting with the Elsevier databases, which is next to impossible. And I just read from, I think it was MIT or Massachusetts, there was a news article also from their libraries recently that they were encountering the same thing with the Elsevier negotiations, that AI was in the language, and so how to deal with that. And then in our library, we have done an online workshop. 200 people registered for the workshop. And the workshop was simply called Exploring AI Tools. And we had a disclaimer in the workshop saying we were not recommending these databases, nor are we subscribing to them. We were just sharing information with the staff so that they know more about these tools and what they might want to pursue. SciSpace is one that we've had quite a few questions about in my library. So one of the librarians during this workshop, it was like a 90-minute workshop, and each of us, me and two other librarians, each of us took two or three generative AI tools to go over. And so the science librarian, he chose this one, and it's SciSpace. So we've had questions about it. Basically, you ask your question. You can see that in the top search box. So the example question, what is the EU AI Act? Then SciSpace goes through the papers that it has available, which is basically all open access papers. So it is somewhat limited, but then it puts together a paragraph with the citations, and then you click on the number and it will show you the insights. You can create columns, which are specified. So there's the too long didn't read, there's the insights, but do keep in mind, even on, I'll show you the next tool, which is really like the first tool in many ways. So there's kind of a, I guess I would say right now there's just a lot of tools coming out as folks kind of battle out which tools will survive and who can create the best one. But I also hear a lot about Elicit because they started as a nonprofit, and I think a lot of faculty at my university liked that. That's why I was getting questions about it, but they have now since become a for-profit company. They essentially do the same thing. You ask it a question. So I said, should librarians engage with ChatGPT? Then it summarizes what it considers the top 4 papers, but you don't know why they're the top 4 papers, so keep that in mind. And then it cites some papers, and then over on the right-hand side, again, are the columns that you can customize with information about the papers. I have found personally this tool to be useful when I ask it a question, and then I create a column for methodology of studies so I can see the different methods that have been used in studies. But on the Elicit page, if you go there, they are very upfront about how much of the information is hallucinated, which is great. They weren't so upfront before. And they basically say you have to assume that there is incorrect information, so to follow up and make sure you look at the original source. And then I don't know if this is happening to you, but we are now getting our first calls from different AI companies asking us to subscribe to their tools for the institution, for the university. So Elicit has moved to that model. And it's an interesting model because you can see, I took this screenshot. I think I took it in the fall. I haven't updated it lately. But they have been going with the credits method. And when I noticed this, I asked some colleagues about it, and they said this is based on a gaming model. This is what gamers use, is different credits. So for $10, you get 12,000 credits. When they introduced the subscription model, I did not subscribe, but I'm just really waiting to see what faculty on my campus use, because there are so many, I can't decide which one might be useful to subscribe to better understand how faculty and students are using it. But then they're also sending emails, as you can see, to faculty telling them to tell the library to order the package. So these are the tools. I'm sure as I was going through the tools, you thought of some tools that I did not mention. And I find that it's always useful to ask folks what tools they recommend or what tools you have used, so that we just have that space to learn from one another, because especially when we're in different locations around the globe, hearing what other tools are coming up or what we should be aware of is always useful. So if you have some different tools that you recommend, or you could say that you have used them, please do type that in here. I think ChatGPT is going to be the primary tool that most folks have used, Site. As I said, I do have a subscription. I just got that subscription a month ago, right before they unveiled the free GPT 4.0 Scopus AI Bing. My university does, I should add this, my university, as of 2 months ago, we have a subscription to Bing Enterprise, which includes DALL-E. So when I teach my class next year, I do plan on using Bing and DALL-E. I've not heard of Kimmy. And then Scopus AI, I have not used it yet, but I've heard quite a bit about it. So there are several websites, one of them being Ithaca, New York. Their library kind of arm has a page dedicated to all of the tools and summarizing what they are, but there's really a lot to keep track of. So right now I'm not sure which ones to recommend or not recommend. As I said, I was recommending Illicit because they were a nonprofit. I still do prefer them, but there are tools now that do the same thing. So there are a lot of different activities happening with libraries around the globe. And so I just have some screenshots here of a few things that are happening. This is, for example, from NYU Abu Dhabi, and they're doing different sessions for exploring and prompt engineering, AI search engines. This is definitely more online workshops than we've done, but we're kind of regrouping to see what online trainings we should offer in the future. At my university, we do have other departments on campus that are working with AI. So we have a Center for Teaching and Learning, and they have been hosting, they're calling it, I can't remember what it's called, but it's a workshop for faculty, and they take classes once a week, and then at the end, they give a debrief about what they learned. And I do a session. So I do one session about AI, libraries, and ethics during that faculty workshop. Here is tips for students from the Middle East. And then this one is DALL-E. I'll talk about that in a sec. I see the chat there. And this one is from the University of Calgary. This was just announced maybe 2 weeks ago, and it's actually our head librarian, the director of our library, she sent this to me. And it's a Center for Artificial Intelligence Ethics, Literacy, and Integrity at the University of Calgary. I have set up a meeting to talk with the folks that put this together. And so I'm having a conversation with them in a week because our university librarian likes this idea and thinks it might be a direction to go. I should also add that my university is a little bit unique in that one of our graduates from undergraduate is Jensen Huang, who is the founder of NVIDIA, and now I think maybe the richest man in the world. And so he donated a $50 million supercomputer to our university this year. And that will be installed next year. And so my university is trying to make plans for when that building and the supercomputer go live. And so the library is involved in those conversations as well. So that's what's happening there. Also, I wanted to talk quickly about different resources for learning. And the best thing I found in my learning journey at the very beginning was something I found in a European university context. So a MOOC, a multi-online, massive online course. I can never remember what MOOC stands for, but it's a massive online course. And Una Europa has a course called AI in Society. And it was just such a great online class. It was very short. And I did it last summer, so you could do it in your, it took like a couple hours a week maybe, but it was a really good introduction into how AI could affect society now and in the long run and things to think about as a culture. I also took another MOOC from King's College London called Generative AI in Higher Education. That one is just a 2-week class, and then you do like an hour a day. There is a AI hub in England through CLIP. And then I have relied quite a bit on the Rutgers AI Council working document. So it's basically the university, some faculty, and some librarians are keeping a working document. And then, as I mentioned, I wrote an article called Generative Artificial Intelligence, 8 Critical Questions for Libraries that I wrote with 2 of my library colleagues here in our library. And we wanted to write this article because we had spent so much of our time over a few months learning about AI that we wanted to help librarians who were just starting to really investigate AI to maybe skip some of the learning we had to do because there are just a lot of questions. And so we wished we would have had some quicker answers to our questions in the very beginning. And then if you have any learning or resources that you have used to learn more about AI, please share those so that we can, again, learn from one another in terms of best sources for learning, whether it be a book, whether it be an article, whether it be an online course. Someone, as you do answer that, someone here asked, what is DALL-E? I'm going to type in the name here. So it's spelled like this, DALL-E. And DALL-E is, it's one of the image creating sites. So Midjourney and DALL-E, I think, are the number one and number 2 image generation sites. And I only play around with those a little bit because it doesn't really tie into my job all that much. Although I do have a subscription so that I can use it and talk about it a little bit with people. And definitely, yes, if you have questions, please do enter them into the chat. I'm very happy to answer any questions you have, or if you have some information you want to share, I'm happy to receive that as well. As I said, we're moving forward with these AI conversations. I do think it's a complicated landscape. I am a person who loves tech things, so I'm excited to move forward, but I'm also I don't mind if it would move a little bit slower so that we could all kind of learn more about the technology and how we as a society want to move forward with these technologies. And there was a quote that somehow went missing on those slides that disappeared. And the quote was from Helen Toner, who is one of the board members for OpenAI, who basically ousted Sam Altman from OpenAI in the fall. And her quote is essentially that She would like everyone to be involved in the AI conversation and that you don't have to be a tech genius because it's going to affect all parts of our society and therefore everyone is needed, from teachers to librarians. So I think the more we can learn about it, then the more we can help each other out and help guide conversations in the future about how to use it and how it can be used. Okay, I guess nobody has any resources to recommend, which is fine. So I am going to stop sharing my screen. And then if folks could, just if you have any questions, please let me know in the chat box. Otherwise, can I open that AI Hub link? Yes. Hold on. Here you go.
各位老师，如果你们想用中文来提问的话呢，你可以写中文。Laurie, I mentioned that some of the our colleagues from China, they can write in Chinese, and I can do the translation.
That's great. Thank you. So we do have a question. What are a few use cases of AI being used in library daily operations? This is actually a more difficult question than you would think. And I know this at the university level because at my university, as I said, I'm involved in conversations at the university level. One of the groups I'm involved in is the University AI Task Force, which is focused on teaching and learning. And they keep looking for use cases and they're not finding them. So I think that's one of the kind of interesting things right now is what libraries are using it and in what ways. If you look at the materials of Leo Lowe at the University of New Mexico, and you can just type in Leo Lowe to any search engine really. And Leo has been writing about how he's using it in his libraries to save time. Like he just recently published something with his assistant and how she uses AI to summarize notes. And then in the databases, it is being integrated more into library databases. But as far as actual use case, not just learning about AI, I haven't really heard of any uses. But in our university, there's some difficulties with the language models themselves that are being used and built. So there is a librarian I know of, and he's been using it to create chat bots to answer library questions, which can be used to create basically bots to answer questions based on what's on your website, and you can also add additional information. So there is, for example, at my university, there is a department doing that. I've tested it out, and it is a little interesting. It doesn't actually answer questions the way I would like it to, so there's still some things to be figured out there. What does the future mean if librarians don't catch up with AI? I mean, this is anyone's guess, but I think I think that it's just going to be a part of our lives. It's already there, even in ways we don't think of it, and it's being used. So when you use, for example, Google now, if you use Google Docs, which we use a lot at my university, it's much more embedded in Google Docs than it used to be. Um, uh, I do think librarians need to be aware of the changes that are coming, at least have a few. That's basically what my library has done, is have a few people on staff who we talk with one another, and try to keep everyone abreast of what's happening and on task, if you will. So this summer, I'm going to spend more time learning about AI because, as I said, I'm teaching a 1-credit class in the fall. My class is going to be split into 2 parts. The first part of the class is going to be hands-on learning, where we will use Bing. As I said, we have a subscription to Bing and also to Copilot. And so I'm going to have the students use that along with DALL-E, and we'll do hands-on exercises. But then we're going to have a visitor from NASA. There's a librarian at NASA who's on the AI ethics committee at NASA. She's going to do a guest presentation. And then we're going to use newspapers, so kind of do newspaper information literacy to see what the current headlines are about AI, and then discuss the ethics as a class. How have you received any training sessions on AI and then give course to faculty and students? Or self-learning? I mean, this is one thing I do use ChatGPT for. Sometimes I'll go to ChatGPT and ask it for current information, like what are the things librarians should be aware of, or what learning is happening. For what I find ChatGPT best for is brainstorming ideas related to these topics, and then going to the web and finding the information myself. But there's really just a lot of learning going on right now for everyone, and I think that's okay. And I think starting your learning in different ways, everyone's different, but as I said, we had a book club on my campus. There are faculty workshops hosted by our Center for Teaching and Learning. The university is currently discussing how to deal with the many, many tools, and so that different staff can get different subscriptions. So I was in a meeting with 3 people last week, and we were each discussing which tools we had subscriptions to and how we were each paying for them. Like I was using university funds, but another person was using her own funds. And then I like to attend everyone's presentations and learn from other groups. And I also participate in conversations outside of libraries, because I think we know that libraries are not the fastest moving. And so just to keep abreast of what businesses are doing. And then at my university, we do have a really good business college. So there are a couple business faculty that I'm in contact with, and I discuss AI with them. But I do think we need to have more conversations. We need to do more reading and talk with one another. So it's just everywhere, and there's just so many points of learning that you can do related to AI.
Laurie, there is a question on any key information assimilation or clues or just self-learning.
Well, why I talked about the MOOCs is there are a lot of MOOCs. If you go, like the way I found the MOOCs was, I'm sure, through just a Google search and then different listservs. But within the US, for example, ACRL and ALA have groups for chat boards for discussing libraries. There is also a Slack channel. If you have Slack, there is a library group from Read Helper, and I might be able to share that. Hold on. There we go. I'm going to put the link right here. If you have Slack, there is a group called Artificial Intelligence in Libraries. It's hosted by a librarian in Idaho, and he has kind of monthly conversations with folks that you can engage in, and you can participate from anywhere. Of course, you do have to have Slack So that would be the one thing. And then, as I said, the MOOCs and joining different listservs and Slack groups just so I can find out about these things. And then I will say the best place where I have learned so many things is LinkedIn, which I used to find LinkedIn useless, honestly. But now I'm finding LinkedIn is the place to go for professional information regarding AI. And the reason I'm finding it especially useful is it seems that the folks who work in AI outside of libraries, that's what they use. They're having conversations on LinkedIn.
Okay. Laurie, there's another question. The latest question is if the cooperative project relate to librarians of your campus with professors. What are the details working jobs will the librarians to take in such a AIGC project?
So, I mean, we're really in conversation about that. But as I said, I was initially invited to join the AI task force, which is really a teaching and learning task force that was put together by one of the vice provosts of my university. And so I was added to that group. So there are many faculty on that meeting group. Since that time, there are 2 other groups that have been established on my campus. So now we have 3 university-wide groups made up of different people, all investigating AI and how to incorporate it into the university. And then at my university, we're a little unique, but there are many university librarians in the US who are at professor status. So I am a professor and I'm a practicing librarian. And so in that way, we interact with professors one-on-one quite a bit through faculty senate and other areas. And so as I said, we have the Jensen Huang supercomputer coming next year. And the dean of my library is the one who interacts with other people across campus related to larger strategic initiatives. So that is not me, that's her. And so she's in conversations like with provosts and others, and she is the one who brought to me her interest in maybe creating an artificial ethics and artificial intelligence center. So it's just something that's kind of like a brainstorm idea right now, but she is trying to work with the provosts and others to decide what part the library plays in moving initiatives about AI forward. But I don't want to paint a picture of a smooth and cohesive moving forward, because I found that talking to people at other university libraries, we are one of the libraries embedded in a university that is an engineering school. We actually have a PhD, which we've had for many years. My university has a PhD in artificial intelligence, and we've had that over a decade, for a very long time. So we're definitely a campus that's engineering, AI, computer science focused, but it was really in a bubble. So all of these conversations about AI really happened in a bubble of engineers, computer scientists, and those folks. So when ChatGPT came onto the scene, that's when other people got involved in the conversation. So from there, it hasn't been as smooth as I would like it to be. So there has been, some stops and starts, figuring out who's in control, who's hosting the conversations. And every university in the US is structured so differently. So for example, my university librarian went on a visit, I think it was to the University of Florida, and she was talking about how their tech is more centrally organized than here at my university. And my university, there's a lot of freedom from different departments. So I think it so much depends on how your university is structured, and then what the interaction is like between professors and librarians, and where professors have traditionally been in conversations versus in this time period. But I do think knowing about AI and showing up for conversations, knowing about it, what's happening, has helped our library quite a bit. Because last year in the fall, what happened after the summer break, so at our university, most of the faculty go away for the summer, and the librarians were all here. And I spent the whole summer really learning everything I could about AI. So what's kind of interesting that happened when the faculty came back is that I was one of the people on campus at that point who knew the most about AI outside of like engineering, like how would it affect humanities and how would it affect the teaching environment. And word of mouth spread really fast. And I had a lot of one-on-one meetings with like deans and faculty just contacting me saying, oh, I heard you know about AI and I need to like talk with you about it. So I was just kind of helping other people get up and get started. So in that way, word has spread that the library knows what's going on with AI and we're open to having conversations about how to work with it.
Well, I have the last question, if I
Yeah.
may ask, on behalf of everyone here, because everyone in this chat are professional librarians, and well, they may have issues in catching up with AI. So, based on your experience, how do they catch up with the AI at the same time as well guide their team in catching up with AI? Because you
Hmm.
have gone through so much experiences, right? Yeah,
I
and
think this is
it's challenging. Yeah.
it is challenging. This
Yeah.
is definitely, I guess, the main question I've been getting from libraries. For example, in the past 2 months, just folks have contacted me directly asking if I would just talk with their staff, like in a small meeting, talk with their staff about what we've done here at our library. And at this point, it really seems to be us sharing with one another. What are you doing? What have you learned? Where are you going? And that's why we wrote the article, Generative Artificial Intelligence, 8 Critical Questions for Libraries. It is an open article, so it's free to anyone to read who would like to read it. But we wrote it as a beginning point so folks could begin thinking about it and what questions you may have as you move forward. Then I would look at, for example, Leo Lowe's work. I would join listservs, and then I would, you know, there are some books that are just really good. And so Unmasking AI by Joy Buolamwini is really good. Also, Co-Intelligence is a new book by Ethan, oh, I forget his last name, but there are some books as well. And I would encourage others also to put into chat if you have some recommended materials or readings.
Thank you so much, Laurie, and thank you all the participants today for your time and this very productive and comprehensive session by Laurie. So let's give applause to Laurie and thank her for her time to for this meeting, the first keynote presentation for the CALA Asia Pacific. Thank you very much, Laurie.
Thank you.